I'm calling you because of recent developments in Ethiopia after a prominent artist has been reported killed. What do you know so far? What's happening in the country in terms of human rights situation in Ethiopia right now?
Well, there are reports of protests in Addis Ababa and other cities and towns following the killing of very popular Oromo singer Haacaaluu Hundeessaa. And so it's absolutely key that the Ethiopian authorities respond to this by acting urgently to reduce tensions and to ensure that security forces do not make what could be a combustible situation worse. The government needs to order security forces not to use excessive force or to carry out arbitrary arrests, including against protesters, as they've often done in the past.
And also referencing to your report, you had an extensive report back in April looking into the conditions of human rights situation right now and the lack of response from the current government, including internet shutdown. If you can give me a background of what this is happening at the heels of the recent report.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, in April, we released a report which was investigating both the abuses but also the violence which had happened during 3 days of unrest in the country in October 2019. And what we had seen was that although the government, both regional government in Oromia and the federal government, had initiated investigations into some of the abuses and the violence in Ambo town and in Dodola town, both in the Oromia region, which we had looked into, this hadn't resulted in any clear forms of redress and any final outcomes of these investigations. At the same time, as you say, we have raised concerns in early 2020 when the government carried out a prolonged internet and phone shutdown in Western Oromia region. And we raised concerns about the impact this was having on families who couldn't communicate amongst themselves, on health services. This was obviously particularly concerning once the pandemic began to affect Ethiopia. But it was also concerning because this meant that communities and people outside of Western Oromia couldn't get information on what was happening, and notably on the government's counterinsurgency operations there. So then putting that into the current context, it's absolutely key for the government to make sure that as soon as possible it is providing accurate, timely information to the public on what they're doing to investigate yesterday's killing, but also how they are responding to what could be a very tense situation. So constant, clear, accurate information is going to be key, and transparency is going to be key here.
Abiy Ahmed has been in power for over a year plus. What is the ultimate solution for these kinds of outbursts and violence and protests now that we are seeing protests happening in the capital city? Is there any sustainable solution for the country moving forward?
I mean, obviously, this killing appears to be generating very profound reactions, but I think this is once again a trigger for the expression of underlying grievances. As we saw last year with the October protests and violence that we saw, this was also an expression of anger with a lack of reforms. A lot of promises had been made in the past, some of which have been followed up on, many of which have not been. So I think it really is key for the authorities to make sure that they are creating a space in which grievances can be expressed peacefully, but also making sure that people feel that their grievances are leading to concrete reforms. So I think, as we've said in the past, this is both a question of reforming key institutions. The security forces are one of the places where the government really needs to focus, and we're talking here not only about the federal security forces, but also the regional security forces, making sure that people feel that they have places where they can go and will be listened if they have complaints against government institutions, against security force behavior and actions, but also making sure that different parts of society are having their voices heard. And again, this is going to be absolutely critical around the postponed elections. Once again, making sure that these are not perceived or actually executive decisions in which other parts of society, opposition parties, but broader parts of society don't have a say is going to be absolutely critical to ensuring that this situation doesn't happen again.
Elections are slotted again past the pandemic. Any concrete date that you've heard from the government that is promising for the elections to take place?
No, I mean, of course, there have been the recent discussions around, months after the public health crisis is over. I think key here is really going to make sure that there is a transparent communication about what is happening. But as I was just saying, really making sure that all parties and all parts of society feel that their voices and their perspectives are heard in these discussions, and that there will be a space for different groups to also basically have their voices heard in the campaign period, etc. So there are a lot of concerns, and I think the problem is there aren't always many avenues and channels through which these concerns are able to be voiced or heard, and often a lack of evidence that the government is listening when these concerns are being voiced.